Hello and welcome to Star Wars Real Talk. Kenobi was a show I wanted for a really long time. I remember when Revenge of the Sith came out and my 10-year-old brain was trying to process everything it had just taken in. The fall of the Republic and the rise of the Empire. My entire childhood consisted of episodes 4, 5, and 6. But more importantly, and for the context of this video, 1 and 2. I felt like the prequel era of Star Wars would never end. As a child, I wasn't eagerly waiting for episode 3 to drop. I just watched 2 over and over again. So when 3 finally released, it completely shattered my entire understanding of the prequel era. I understood with a greater depth what it finally meant, and that the whole thing was just a setup for the OT, to show us the fall of Anakin into the depths of Vader. For the next 10 years, that was it. The peak of Star Wars. There was nothing more. Although I grew into an adult, I found myself in a similar position. I wasn't waiting for another Star Wars movie, I was just watching Revenge of the Sith over and over again. But what happened after that movie was something that I always wondered about. A giant gap between trilogies, never to be filled. Eventually we got new Star Wars media that was a bit of a hit and a miss. Some great new stories, and some straight up garbage stories. But the one story I had not stopped wanting since that 10-year-old boy left the theater in 2005. What happened to Obi-Wan Kenobi after Revenge of the Sith? 17 years later, I got it. This is important context for you to know going into my review of the Kenobi show. I wanted this show more than any other media, and frankly, it's going to be hard for me to get as excited for any new Star Wars for a long time after this. It's not news to you that Disney has dropped the ball with a lot of recent Star Wars projects, and it has become very popular to absolutely shit on every new piece of content that they release. Some deserving, some not. I'm not doing this in this video. I'm not jumping on the bandwagon of love or hate for this show. I'm coming at this with my feelings. The reason I made this YouTube channel to begin with. I do not care what the popular opinion is. This is my opinion. Kenobi hit the mark in every way that it needed to. It told us a story of Obi-Wan Kenobi post Order 66 and pre A New Hope. That is all that it is and all it was supposed to be. It did it in a way that is believable and keeps the canon intact going into the OT. Sure, they walked the line on a few narrative decisions, but I believe overall that this show did more good than harm for the Star Wars universe. Ultimately, this show was about people. The story didn't have to be anything incredible, and I didn't really care what happened in it. It could have been 6 episodes of Obi-Wan just living on Tatooine, protecting Luke and chilling with Qui-Gon. The fact that we got this little adventure that we got at all is just a bonus in my opinion. Up to this point, all we knew about Obi-Wan was that he became a hermit on a desolate sand planet and didn't do fuck all except watch Luke from a distance until the day Luke chased down R2 to his residence. The fact that they wrote a story that got Obi-Wan off-world in a believable way is incredible. I never expected that, so I'll give the writers credit there. Back to what I was saying about the show being about people. Let's talk about them. Starting with Obi-Wan. Obi-Wan is pretty much in a state of reactivity for most of this show. He has little time to process or plan ahead, and is constantly put in difficult situations where he has to deal with whatever obstacle is in front of him. To me, it wasn't so important what that obstacle was, just that he dealt with it in a way that the Obi-Wan we knew would have. Not because I was sweating the canon or waiting for Disney to fuck up his character, it's just because I wanted to stay immersed in the show. When you watch the original 6 movies, you don't question the actions or the motives of the main characters. It's just a story, and you watch it unfold. Many people forget that this is a story that had a beginning, middle, and end, and lost their shit because they were too impatient with the character development. This is, however, only partially their fault. Disney's too damn scared to make movies anymore, and this show would have been absolutely better suited as a movie. Imagine if it were paced out the length of a movie, the full story in one sitting. Well, it would have solved a lot of the problems people have with it. Any slow pacing, filler, or lengthy character development would have all been removed as issues with the show. Instead, people had a week between episodes to analyze and become bitter before the next week aired. That immediately solved the problem that they were just reeling in from the past week. Anyways, I think Obi-Wan remained Obi-Wan from start to finish, and that was what was important to me. I do wish, however, he spent less time panic reacting and spent more time calm and in control like the Obi-Wan we know and love. One thing I always loved about him and every other piece of Star Wars media he's been in is his ability to be patient and think critically. I miss that cool, confident, sarcastic side of him, and I wish we'd seen more of that. It makes sense that he wasn't though, given the state the galaxy was in. To expect him to be anything less than scared and unsure doesn't actually make any sense at all. Everything that he knew about the galaxy got turned on its head in literally a day, and then he had to go hide in a cave and shut off the outside world for the next 10 years. The Obi-Wan we got was completely on the mark for what that kind of person would be like. However, I think this show would have been better off with a little bit less action and more time spent with Obi-Wan just talking or thinking or just simply dealing with his PTSD. I think they did a fine job when they did do this. I just would have liked more of it. Less of an adventure story and more of an Obi-Wan making peace with himself story, which fortunately they did do in the end in a spectacular way. There was a lot of time spent building up other characters for the story, and I really think that they just didn't need to do that. It wasn't wrong or bad storytelling, it was just unnecessary. In the end, this was the Obi-Wan Kenobi show, and that's what we came to see. To counter my own point, it was really interesting to see a man who previously held so much respect and prestige to be hunted like a dog, and seeing this new side of Obi-Wan out of his comfort zone actually did a lot to round out his character. Speaking of other characters, let's get into that for a bit. Leia was an instrumental part of the story. Honestly, I didn't mind this. I just wasn't really expecting it. Like, I expected Luke to play a slightly larger role than he did, but it worked out just fine using Leia. She was portrayed perfectly, and the story did an excellent job creating an origin story for the Leia we know and love in the OT. It also did an incredible job explaining her relationship to Obi-Wan in A New Hope, because I always thought that it was just the most random thing ever that she reached out to him in A New Hope, like she already knew him and they went way back. I always wondered how. And now I know. If I were to be at all critical of her character in the show, it's maybe that she just played too large a role in it. This isn't the fault of Leia or how she was portrayed. It's just that I'm getting tired of Disney rehashing the same story of an unlikely bond between a reluctant protector and a child that needs protecting. I am absolutely bored and sick of it. Chase scenes are so boring and take up so much time in an episode. They accomplish very little to the actual story because the Guardian always gets the child back at the end. It's simple and lazy writing, and usually is just an excuse to inject cheap action into a bland story. The stakes are especially low when we know which characters are going to survive in the end. I thought it was done well in this show, and without fault, but I'm just so bored of it. Most of what Obi-Wan does in this show hinges around Leia's well-being, and it just leaves something to be desired narratively speaking. However, I really enjoyed her character, and I think this added to the Star Wars story in a positive way. Just too much time spent here. Again, an issue I think this being a movie would have resolved. For example, Leia's whole conflict would have been resolved in the first 20 or 30 minutes of the movie, instead of 3 or 4 50-minute episodes in a TV show. The next most important character in the show is my personal favorite, Darth Vader. I'm glad that we got the amount of Vader that we did. It is so much more than we're used to, as Disney uses him very sparingly. Let me tell you, something changes when Vader is on the screen. Everyone leans in on their seats. My heart starts racing when Vader starts walking. Something about him as a character is so intoxicating, and this show did a really good job portraying that. I know people had some issues with the motivations behind some of his actions. The truth is, we will never know why he does what he does. Vader is a complicated character. His mind is a mess, especially after seeing his old master again. He only gains the confident resolve that we know from him in the OT because of how this show plays out. It's just something to chew on. In my opinion, I believe that he was seeing red, and that influenced a lot of his decisions. You also have to consider he wears a helmet, and that's all we get from him. It's all on creative camera angles and music to portray his emotions, and that's about the extent of it. We can't read his facial expressions or body language, and that can leave you wondering what's going on inside his head. He's always been this way, and that's part of the reason why we all love him. He's so damn mysterious. If you have any issues with Vader in this show, now imagine that the show was a movie. The pacing of a movie may have changed his actions or the timing of his actions. For example, this TV show suffered a bit of an issue where certain characters had to be where they needed to be at the right time and for no other reason than that, so that the show could continue the way that it was written. Every episode needs a climax, but in a media where the main characters can't die, it can leave you scratching your head on why certain characters were left alive going into the next episode. A movie would not have had this issue. Overall though, I loved Vader in this show. I feel they did him well, and he actually underwent character development, which I didn't expect, but I love to see. He's usually the big baddie who shows up to put the overconfident main characters in their place, but in this show, he really deals with Anakin stirring up inside him and having to sort out his feelings on things, especially on his relationship with his old master. Yes, he's already been Vader for some time before this show, but the one thing people seem to forget is that the light inside him never really went completely out, or Return of the Jedi couldn't have ended the way that it did. Vader is able to smother it for long periods of time. That's kind of the way I understand it. At the end of the show, Obi-Wan makes peace with himself, and Vader does the same. putting an end to Anakin's pesky feelings until Luke pulls them back out of him later in the OT, which was brilliantly done. Now I want to talk a little bit about Reva. I actually really enjoyed Reva's character in the show. The actor did a phenomenal job, and she portrayed emotions in such a gripping way. She reminded me a lot of prequel-era Hayden acting out Anakin's mixed feelings on whatever was happening. From the first episode I could see that she was the villain, but she seemed conflicted about something. Then, when she finally revealed her intentions, it was just perfect. I think her character was done well. However, I think she should have died when Vader stabbed her, straight up. I don't like that Disney lets people survive saber stabbings now. Like, what the fuck, this used to be a death blow. Now no one dies anymore. I expected 2 or 3 Inquisitors to go down in the show, but none of them did. I thought they would serve the role of Kenobi fodder, but literally none of them died in this show, which is just kind of weird. However, I did really like the Inquisitors in the show, and I was worried about them not being done well. I really liked the 5th brother, and I was disappointed that there's nothing really happened with his character. They just kind of dropped him like an old toy and left his beef with Reva completely unresolved. I was very much expecting him or Reva to face off, or for Obi-Wan to take him down. I thought there must be a reason that he's in the show and he's in all these episodes, but nope. The Grand Inquisitor's death fake-out was annoying. I didn't like that he had died, or so I thought, but I made peace with the writing decision eventually. Then, nope, he's back. Disney, please stick to your guns, just even one time on a character death, please. We are all getting sick of fake-outs. In regards to the issues of Reva taking up too much showtime, surviving the stab from the lightsaber, or whatever other problems people had with her, could have been resolved, I'll say it again, with the pacing of a movie. She would have been better suited as an early to mid movie villain that had all of her same motivations and development, but would have died halfway through the movie to make room for Vader or some other final conflict. By the final episode, when she's hunting down Luke on Tatooine, it really felt like she had overstayed her welcome on the show. Like, can we go back to Obi-Wan and Vader's fight now, or do we have to see Aunt Beru throw more flower pots at her? Anyways, I did like Reva's character, and I felt that she had a lot of really great depth. She looked really cool, and I liked her ambition and drive to accomplish her goals. Did she need to be in this show? Not really. Am I glad that she was? Yes. Before I wrap this up, I just want to touch on this scene between Vader and Kenobi. I could do a whole video on this, but for the sake of time, I'll be brief. Say what you will about this show, but for this one scene, it was all worth it. I honestly don't care about anything else that may not have been exactly up to par with what the fans wanted for this show to be good. I don't even care if it was branded an objectively bad show. Obi-Wan could have been chopping meat for 5 episodes, and if this scene had happened on the 6th episode, I would have chalked this whole show up to a win. It was just so brilliantly written. Obi-Wan's character development reaches a peak here. After he has a hard talk with his fallen Padawan, he is able to finally make peace with himself. And the interesting thing is that Vader helps him do this. Maybe inadvertently, but he does. Vader telling Obi-Wan that he's not responsible for what happened to him was one of the most beautiful moments in all of Star Wars, hands down. Maybe it was a little bit of Anakin in him that wanted to spare his master of the pain he could see him in. Maybe it was a prideful Vader that didn't want to feel inferior and admit that he fucked up. I prefer the first one, but honestly, I don't care. I don't think I breathed through that whole conversation, if only to choke out a few tears. I am so glad that Vader's mask was destroyed so we could see some emotion on him for a change. Obviously the voice changer cutting in and out was a nice touch, but I also felt Anakin and Vader as people were cutting in and out here, fighting for control. You can hear it in the tone shifting and you can see it on his face. There is that classic conflict that we're so used to seeing in Anakin and in Vader. This might be a younger version of Vader, and he might be arguably stronger than Obi-Wan, but Obi-Wan was in his prime at this moment. His state of mind was clear and he knew what he had to do. He was fully engulfed in the light side of the Force again, and you can see it surged through him. He had no reservations fighting Vader here once he found his resolve. Vader, on the other hand, was a mess. He was not fighting his best, and his state of mind was chaos. Everything played out exactly the way that I would have expected it to. I am so happy that the show built up to this beautiful moment between them. I wouldn't trade it for anything. In conclusion, I really enjoyed the show. I thought every episode was a banger. If you look hard enough, sure, you're gonna find issues. You always will. However, a lot of these issues melt away when you imagine this show as a movie, so take from that what you will. Could the story have been better in this show? Absolutely, but I'm just so happy to see Obi-Wan and Anakin/Vader on the screen. In regards to how great the story was in this show, in this instance, I don't really care. Seeing Ewan and Hayden return to the screen was a concept that I never thought would happen again, and it did. And I'm just so grateful for it. I'm too happy about that to be bitter, honestly. For me, as long as the characters that we know and love stayed true to themselves, that was all that mattered. To see an Obi-Wan story during this time period was all that I wanted. To get Vader in there as well was just a bonus. I feel this show did well walking the tightrope of canon. Considering what we've got in the past, this was pretty damn good, and it ended so perfectly. I hope that we don't get another season. I feel as a fan base we've become greedy, and we want more of a good thing. That's not our own fault, but to the fault of Hollywood milking already finished series for sequels because it's easy money. Now it's become something that we expect. I hope that for a change, we can just have this good thing and leave it alone. To be blunt, we need to stop fucking with finished stories. That's how characters get ruined, and people are never happy with how sequels turn out anyway. That's my roundabout way of saying that I really love this show, and I don't need any more of it. I put that 10-year-old's dream of seeing Obi-Wan's story in this time period to rest, and I will cherish the moments that this show gave me forever. Thank you so much for watching, and may the Force be with you. Oh, I did have one complaint with this show. It was too damn dark!